License and registration, Officer Brad Whitaker said, tapping two knuckles against the driver's window. And don't make me ask twice, Marcus. The name hit harder than the flashing red and blue lights behind him. Marcus Ellison sat still behind the wheel of his black sedan, hands resting at 10 and 2, the late Georgia sun pressing through the windshield like a hot palm. For a moment, the road outside the town of Fairmont seemed to fold backward 22 years, back into polished school hallways, yellow locker doors, the smell of floor wax, and the sound of boys laughing too loudly because one of them needed an audience. Brad Whitaker had the same smile now. Older face, thicker jaw, state-issued sunglasses hanging from his shirt, but the same smile. Half amusement, half ownership. Marcus lowered the window with a soft electric hum. Warm air rushed in, carrying cut grass, asphalt heat, and the faint metallic crackle of the police radio from Brad's cruiser. "Good afternoon, officer," Marcus said. His voice was even, almost quiet. Brad leaned closer, one hand resting near the rim of the window, his shadow cutting across Marcus's gray suit jacket. "Officer now?" he said, letting out a small laugh. "That's funny. Last time I saw you, you were carrying books bigger than your arms and acting like you were too good for the rest of us." Marcus looked at him, really looked. There was dust on Brad's boots, a coffee stain near the edge of his uniform pocket, and a badge polished bright enough to catch the sun. A badge could change how people moved around a man. It could make strangers lower their voices. It could make a quiet road feel like a courtroom where only one side had been sworn in. "What was the reason for the stop?" Marcus asked. Brad's smile thinned. "Reason?" He glanced at the sedan, then down the empty two-lane road as if the answer were obvious. "You were driving slow. The speed limit is 35. I was doing 32. Brad tilted his head. "Still correcting people, huh?" A breeze pushed through the open window and lifted the corner of a folded program on the passenger seat. Marcus's mother smiled from the front of it in a church hat the color of cream. Evelyn Ellison. Sunrise, 1958. Sunset, last month. Marcus's eyes flicked to the photo and back again. He had come home to stand beside her grave, not to reopen an old wound on a county road named after men who never knew his family existed. Brad noticed the program, but not the meaning. "You here for something important?" he asked, making the word important sound like a costume Marcus had borrowed. Marcus said nothing for 1 second too long. The silence seemed to bother Brad more than any argument could have. Behind them, a school bus rolled past slowly, its brakes sighing at the intersection. A few children turned their faces toward the window, curious about the police lights, curious about the black man in the suit and the white officer standing over him like history had found a uniform. Brad straightened and tapped the roof of the car lightly, not hard, just enough to remind Marcus who controlled the moment. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Marcus inhaled once. The leather steering wheel felt warm beneath his fingers. He could feel his heartbeat, steady but present, like a drum behind a closed door. He looked at Brad's chest camera. A tiny red light blinked, then disappeared when Brad's thumb brushed the device. Marcus saw it. Brad thought he hadn't. "Is your body camera recording, Officer Whitaker?" Marcus asked. Brad's face changed by less than an inch, but Marcus caught it. The same quick flicker he remembered from high school, the look Brad got whenever someone weaker noticed the trick before it landed. "Don't worry about my camera," Brad said. "Worry about following instructions." Marcus opened the door slowly. Heat rose from the pavement in soft waves. His polished shoes touched the shoulder of the road, and the smell of sunbaked tar filled his lungs. Brad stepped back just far enough to give him space, not respect. Marcus stood, buttoned his suit jacket with calm hands, and turned toward the cruiser lights washing the trees in red, then blue, then red again. He was 6 feet tall now, no longer the skinny boy Brad once cornered near the gym after pep rallies, but memory had a cruel way of shrinking a man from the inside. Brad looked him up and down. "Trying to look official, Marcus," he said. "That suit doesn't change where you came from." Marcus looked past him to the town sign half a mile ahead. "Welcome to Fairmont. A good place to call home." He thought of his mother leaving the hospital after 12-hour shifts, shoes in her hand, because her feet hurt too much to walk in them. He thought of her telling him, again and again, "Don't let their cruelty become your character." So Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not reach for the title sitting quietly inside his briefcase. He did not give Brad the anger he had been waiting 22 years to provoke. He only met the officer's eyes and said, "I'll comply, but I'll remember every word." Marcus stepped away from the sedan with the same careful patience his mother had taught him when he was 12 years old, and already learning that innocence did not always protect a black boy in a small town. Keep your hands visible. Keep your voice steady. Let the truth arrive clean. He had hated those lessons as a child, hated the way they sounded like survival instead of freedom, but Evelyn Ellison had never spoken from fear. She spoke from memory. She had raised him in a narrow brick duplex behind St. Luke Baptist Church, less than 3 miles from the road where he now stood in a gray suit, while Brad Whitaker circled him like the past had been given a patrol car. Back then, Marcus had been the kind of boy teachers called promising when they thought he could not hear them. He carried paperbacks with cracked spines, answered questions only when called on, and stayed late in the library because it was quieter than the bus stop. His father, Daniel, had passed when Marcus was 9, leaving behind a tackle box, an old Atlanta Braves cap, and a mortgage Evelyn fought like a storm every month. She worked at Fairmont General Hospital on the night shift, cleaning rooms, changing linens, and whispering prayers over beds long after patients had gone home. When Marcus studied at the kitchen table, she came in before sunrise with tired eyes and swollen hands, but she always touched the top of his head before taking off her shoes. One day, she would tell him, "You are going to walk into rooms they said you did not belong in, and you are going to leave those rooms better than you found them." Marcus believed her because he had to. Fairmont High did not make belief easy. Brad Whitaker ruled the hallways with loud jokes, expensive sneakers, and a father whose badge hung over the town like a family crest. Brad was not the strongest student or the smartest, but he understood power early. He knew which teachers looked away. He knew which insults could be dressed up as jokes. He knew how to make Marcus feel alone in a hallway full of people. Marcus remembered one winter morning when Brad leaned against his locker and called him Professor in a voice that made everyone laugh. Marcus had been holding a scholarship application in one hand and a peanut butter sandwich in the other. He had not answered. He had simply waited until Brad got bored. That was how Marcus survived most things. Silence was not weakness. It was storage. He stored every laugh, every lowered expectation, every counselor who suggested trade school before reading his grades. Then he turned it into motion. College came on a scholarship. Law school came with loans he could barely sleep under. His first courtroom came with a cheap suit and a trembling left hand hidden behind a legal pad. Years passed. The boy who once counted ceiling tiles to avoid crying became the prosecutor victims asked for by name. He learned how to question without cruelty, how to listen without rushing, how to build a case the way his mother built a life, one honest piece at a time. And now, after the governor's appointment, after the ceremony in Atlanta, after the phone calls and headlines he still felt strange reading, Marcus had driven back to Fairmont alone because grief did not care about titles. His mother's memorial program lay on the passenger seat beside a sealed folder from his new office, both of them resting in the same quiet light. Brad pointed toward the rear of the sedan. "Open the trunk," he said. Marcus turned his head slowly. "Are you searching my vehicle? I am asking you to cooperate." "That is not the same thing." Brad gave a short laugh, but it did not reach his eyes. The school bus had disappeared down the road, leaving behind diesel fumes and a silence that felt too wide. A crow called from a telephone wire. Marcus could hear the faint tick of his cooling engine. He could also hear his mother's voice, not loud, not dramatic, just steady as dawn. "Do not let their cruelty become your character." He looked at Brad, at the badge, at the camera that had gone dark, and for the first time since the stop began, something inside him settled. This was not just an old bully playing an old game. This was a man with public power still reaching for the same kind of control. Marcus reached into his pocket slowly, removed his keys with 2 fingers, and held them up where Brad could see. "I will open it," he said, "but I want the record to show that I did not give consent to an unlawful search." Brad's jaw tightened. For 1 second, neither man moved. The red and blue lights kept turning over them, washing the road in color, as if the whole town were holding its breath. Brad took the keys from Marcus with a slow, deliberate motion, the kind meant to make waiting feel like obedience. He walked to the rear of the sedan, his boots grinding lightly over the gravel shoulder, while Marcus stood beside the driver's door with his hands relaxed at his sides. The sun had slipped lower, turning the windshield bronze, and the cruiser lights kept washing over the side of Marcus's face in red and blue waves. Brad opened the trunk and paused as if he expected something to leap out and prove the story he had already written in his head. There was only a neatly folded garment bag, a pair of dress shoes and a cloth cover, a black umbrella, and a small cardboard box filled with his mother's things from the church reception. A Bible with worn corners, a framed photograph, a stack of sympathy cards tied with white ribbon. Brad lifted the umbrella, set it aside, then opened the cardboard box without asking. Marcus felt the movement in his chest before it reached his face. Not anger yet. Something older. Something close to grief being handled by the wrong hands. Careful with that, Marcus said. Brad glanced back. You always this sensitive? He picked up the framed photograph, looked at Evelyn Ellison smiling in her choir robe, then set it down with careless indifference. So that is why you are back. Funeral business. Memorial, Marcus said. Her service was this morning. For the first time, Brad seemed almost interested, but not in a human way. More like he had found a new place to press. Evelyn Ellison, he said, testing the name. She used to work over at the hospital, right? Cleaning rooms. Marcus looked at the road, then at the empty field beyond it where summer grass moved in slow waves. She worked environmental services for 31 years. Brad gave a small shrug. Same thing. The words fell into the heat and stayed there. Marcus did not answer. He had learned long ago that some people used language to put others back where they preferred them. Cleaner instead of worker. Boy instead of man. Trouble instead of citizen. Brad had always been fluent in that language. In high school, he had learned it from dinner tables and locker rooms and the old courthouse steps where men in uniforms laughed with their coffee cups tilted against their belts. His father, Roy Whitaker, had been sheriff for nearly 20 years, a broad-shouldered man with a silver mustache and a handshake that made voters feel safe. People said Roy kept order. Marcus remembered him differently. He remembered Roy sitting in the front row during football games while Brad and his friends owned the hallways. He remembered teachers lowering their voices when the Whitaker name entered a conversation. He remembered complaints that turned into misunderstandings that turned into Marcus being told to let it go. Brad had grown up watching a badge open doors, close mouths, and bend rooms toward him. Now he wore one himself, and the fit looked natural in the worst possible way. He moved around the sedan with a restless confidence, peering through the windows, looking at the back seat, the floor mats, the program on the passenger seat. Nice car, he said. State plates on the rental? Marcus said. Brad paused. Rental, huh? Yes. For a man visiting his hometown, you sure came prepared. Prepared for what? Marcus asked. Brad closed the rear door and stepped closer. That is what I am trying to figure out. The words were calm, but the meaning was not. A pickup slowed as it passed. The driver looked, recognized Brad, then looked away too quickly. That was Fairmont. Not everyone agreed with what happened on its roads, but most people had learned the local habit of not seeing too much. Marcus felt the familiar weight of that silence settle around him. It had lived in classrooms, grocery aisles, church parking lots, and now it lived here, under a wide orange sky beside a police cruiser. Brad turned back to the trunk and reached for the sealed folder near the garment bag. Marcus's voice sharpened by 1 degree. That folder is privileged material. Brad's hand stopped. Privileged, he repeated, amused. Listen to you. Do not open it. Brad smiled without warmth. Or what? The question hung between them, almost childish in its cruelty, almost identical to the one he had asked Marcus outside the gym 2 decades earlier. Marcus could feel the past trying to pull him into its old shape. But he was not that boy anymore. He was not standing under fluorescent lights with homework pressed to his chest. He was a grown man on a public road, and across from him was not just a bully. It was an officer of the law testing whether the uniform could protect the behavior underneath it. Marcus looked at the dark body camera, then at Brad's hand hovering over the folder. You still think power means nobody can question you, he said quietly. Brad's smile faded. The radio inside the cruiser crackled, a dispatcher's voice breaking apart in static, then disappearing. Marcus held his gaze. That was your mistake in school, he said. And it is your mistake now. Brad did not open the folder right away. He let his fingers rest on the edge of it, studying Marcus with a look that tried to turn patience into guilt. The road had grown quieter, the kind of late afternoon quiet that made every small sound stand out. The soft ping of the cooling engine, the dry scrape of grass against the ditch, the low static breath of the cruiser radio. Marcus stood still, his face calm, but inside him something had become very clear. There were moments when a person could mistake peace for surrender. Brad had been making that mistake since they were 16. You know, Brad said, drawing the words out. Most folks who get stopped do not lecture the police. Marcus looked at the badge on his chest. Most folks do not know what they are allowed to ask. Brad smiled again, but this time it looked forced. And you do? Yes. The answer was simple. It landed clean. Brad's eyes narrowed. He stepped away from the trunk and came around to face him, leaving the folder untouched but not forgotten. Then enlighten me, Professor. The old nickname returned like a coin thrown at glass. Marcus heard it, felt the hallway inside it, the lockers, the laughter, the pressure of being watched. But the word no longer owned him. You stopped me for driving below the speed limit, Marcus said. You asked me to step out without explaining a lawful basis for detention beyond the stop itself. You began looking through my vehicle after I clearly stated that I did not consent. Then your body camera stopped recording at the exact moment I asked whether it was on. Brad's jaw shifted. Equipment malfunctions. Conveniently. Careful. I am being careful. Marcus did not raise his voice. That was what made Brad blink. Careful with the law. Careful with my words. Careful with your choices, because one of us should be. The air seemed to tighten around them. A sedan passed slowly in the opposite lane, and the woman driving it looked at Marcus for half a second before her eyes moved to Brad. She did not stop, but her phone was lifted near the steering wheel. Brad noticed too. His posture changed. Not much, just enough to show that the empty road was no longer completely empty. Marcus saw the opening and stepped into it with the quiet control of a man who had spent years speaking in courtrooms where every word could become a record. Officer Whitaker, I am asking you again. Am I being detained for a specific violation, or am I free to leave? Brad let out a breath through his nose. You really think you can talk your way out of anything? This is not talking my way out. This is asking you to follow the Constitution you swore to uphold. The word Constitution changed the temperature. Brad glanced toward the passing sedan, then toward the dark body camera, then back at Marcus. His mouth tightened into a thin line. For a brief second, Marcus saw the boy beneath the uniform, the boy who had always needed the room to laugh with him, the boy who did not know what to do when nobody joined in. Turn around, Brad said, quieter now. Marcus did not move. For what purpose? For officer safety. I have made no threatening movement. My hands have remained visible. I have complied with every lawful instruction. Brad took a step closer, not enough to touch him, but enough to crowd the space. Marcus could smell mint gum and stale coffee. You always had to make things difficult. Marcus looked at him, and the years between them seemed to thin until they were standing in two places at once. Beside a Georgia road under a fading sun, and outside a gymnasium, while a younger Marcus chose silence because nobody with authority had chosen fairness. This time, he would not disappear into that silence. No, Marcus said softly. I made things honest. That is what bothered you. Brad's face hardened. He turned abruptly and walked back to the open trunk, as if motion could restore control. He picked up the framed photograph of Evelyn again, then set it on top of the cardboard box. The movement was not violent, but it was careless enough to make Marcus step forward. Do not use my mother's memory to make a point, Marcus said. Something in his voice had changed. Still calm, but no longer gentle. Brad looked over his shoulder. Then stop acting like you are above this town. Marcus held his gaze. I came back to bury the woman who kept me alive long enough to outgrow men like you. The words struck the air and stayed there. Even Brad seemed to have no answer ready. The sun dipped behind the pines, and for one quiet second the cruiser lights were the brightest things on the road. Then, from somewhere behind them, tires whispered onto the shoulder. Another vehicle had pulled over. Not a civilian car. A black state-issued sport utility vehicle stopped 20 yards back, its engine low and steady. Brad turned toward it, annoyed at first, then uncertain. Marcus did not turn. He already knew the sound of that engine. He already knew who had been trying to reach him for the past 20 minutes. His phone, still inside the sedan, buzzed against the center console, unseen but insistent. Brad looked from the black vehicle to Marcus, and for the first time since the stop began, doubt moved across his face like a cloud. The black sport utility vehicle sat behind the cruiser with its headlights off, silent but unmistakably official. Its windshield reflected the last stretch of sun, turning the glass into a dark mirror. Brad stared at it for 2 seconds too long, then looked back at Marcus as if the answer might be hidden in his expression. Marcus gave him nothing. The driver's door opened first. Lena Brooks stepped out, wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather folder against her chest. She was in her early 30s, composed, sharp-eyed, and moving with the kind of purpose that made people step aside before they understood why. Behind her, another door opened, and Captain Diane Monroe emerged in uniform, her silver hair pulled back, her face already tight with concern. Brad's shoulders stiffened. He recognized rank before he recognized trouble. "Captain," he called, forcing casualness into his voice. "Everything is under control." Diane Monroe did not answer him at first. Her eyes moved from the open trunk to the scattered contents inside it, then to Marcus standing beside the sedan, then to the small framed photograph of Evelyn Ellison resting on top of a cardboard box, as if grief had been placed on display. Something in her expression changed. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. Disappointment arriving before confirmation. Lena walked past Brad without slowing. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice low but clear. "The governor's office has been trying to reach you. We were worried when your location stopped moving." Brad's face shifted. It was a small thing, a twitch near the mouth, but Marcus saw it. So did Lena. Marcus nodded once. "I was delayed." Brad gave a short laugh that came out too dry. "Mr. Ellison?" he repeated. "You his lawyer or something?" Lena turned to him. "I am his chief legal aide." The words were polite. The silence after them was not. Captain Monroe stepped closer, her boots crunching softly on the shoulder. "Officer Whitaker," she said, "why is this vehicle open?" Brad straightened. "Routine traffic stop, Captain." Driver was acting evasive. Marcus looked at him then, slowly. The word evasive floated between them like smoke from an old fire. It was the kind of word that had followed him through life, whenever calm did not look enough like submission. "I asked why I was stopped," Marcus said. "I asked whether I was being detained. I also stated that I did not consent to a search." Brad's jaw tightened. "With respect, Captain, he has been argumentative from the beginning." Diane Monroe glanced at Marcus. The way she looked at him was not the way Brad had looked at him. There was no ownership in it. Only the careful attention of a person realizing she had stepped into something larger than a roadside stop. "Is your body camera active?" she asked Brad. Brad looked down at his chest camera. It malfunctioned. Lena's eyes moved to the device, then to the cruiser, then to the sedan. Again, Brad looked at her sharply. "Excuse me." Lena opened her leather folder and removed a single page. She did not hand it to him. She handed it to Captain Monroe. "This is the 4th reported camera failure linked to Officer Whitaker in 6 months during stops involving black drivers." The road went quiet in a way that felt almost physical. Even the radio static inside the cruiser seemed to shrink. Brad's face reddened beneath the fading sunlight. "That is not accurate." "It is documented," Lena said. "And now there is another concern." She looked toward the trunk. "He accessed privileged legal material from a state vehicle during a stop with a disabled recording device." Brad turned toward Marcus, and anger flashed briefly across his face before fear covered it. "State vehicle?" Marcus walked to the open trunk and, with controlled hands, lifted the sealed folder Brad had nearly opened. He brushed a thin line of dust from its edge. The state seal was visible now, stamped in dark blue at the corner. "Captain." Monroe saw it, and her posture changed completely. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice measured and formal, "I was not informed you had arrived in Fairmont yet." Brad looked from her to Marcus. "What are you talking about?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He placed the folder gently beside his mother's photograph, as if both deserved more care than this roadside had given them. Then he turned back. "I arrived this morning for my mother's memorial," he said. "My official visit was scheduled for tomorrow." Diane Monroe swallowed once. "Officer Whitaker," she said, "this is State Attorney Marcus Ellison." The name seemed to leave her mouth and change the entire road. Brad did not move. His sunglasses hung from his uniform shirt. His badge caught the red pulse of his own cruiser lights. For the first time, The power he had been leaning on did not lean back. Marcus stepped closer, not to threaten, not to tower, but to be heard without raising his voice. "You stopped a citizen you recognized from childhood," he said. "You turned off your camera. You searched without consent. You handled personal memorial items carelessly. And you nearly opened a sealed investigative file from the state attorney's office." Brad's mouth opened, but no words came. The sun dropped lower behind the pines, and the first coolness of evening touched the pavement. Marcus looked at the badge on Brad's chest, then at the photograph of his mother in the trunk. "You thought this was about me coming back to prove something," he said softly. "But I was not the one still living in high school." For a moment, no one spoke. The road held its breath beneath the fading Georgia sky, and the only sound was the slow click of cooling metal from Marcus's sedan. Brad stood near the open trunk, the color drained from his face, while Captain Monroe kept her eyes on him with a kind of restrained disbelief that felt heavier than anger. Lena remained beside Marcus, her folder tucked beneath one arm, but even she did not rush to fill the silence. There are silences that embarrass. There are silences that accuse. This one did both. Marcus turned away from Brad and reached into the trunk, lifting the photograph of his mother with both hands. The frame was warm from the sun, and a faint smudge of dust crossed the glass near Evelyn Ellison's cheek. He wiped it carefully with the inside of his sleeve, slow enough that everyone could see the tenderness in it, slow enough that Brad could understand what he had touched without permission. Evelyn's smile returned beneath the glass, calm and proud, her cream-colored church hat tilted slightly to one side. Marcus had seen that smile in hospital corridors at 6 in the morning, at kitchen tables covered with overdue bills, at high school awards nights where she sat alone in the back row because she had come straight from work and did not want anyone noticing her uniform. He remembered her hands most of all, hands roughened by disinfectant and laundry heat, hands that packed his lunches, circled scholarship deadlines in blue ink, and pressed against his shoulder whenever the world tried to teach him that dignity was something other people could take away. He placed the photograph gently back inside the box, then folded the white ribbon over the sympathy cards. The motion was small. It felt almost sacred. Brad shifted his weight, but he said nothing. Without the confidence in his voice, he looked smaller, not physically, but in the way men do when the story they built about themselves begins to crack. Marcus looked at him, and the old anger came close. It rose behind his ribs, familiar and hot, carrying every hallway, every smirk, every time an adult had told him not to make trouble when trouble had already found him. He could have spoken from that place. He could have used the title now. He could have made Brad feel every inch of the distance between who they had been and who they had become. But then his mother's voice came back, steady as a porch light in rain. "Do not let their cruelty become your character." Marcus inhaled, and the evening air smelled of pine needles, warm pavement, and distant cut grass. He looked toward Fairmont's town sign down the road, the same sign he had passed as a boy in the back seat of his mother's old Buick, watching the letters slide by while promising himself he would leave and never need this place again. Yet here he was, not because he needed Fairmont to admire him, but because something broken in it still affected people who had no title, no camera, no aide arriving behind them in a state vehicle. "Captain Monroe," he said quietly, "please secure the dash camera footage from Officer Whitaker's cruiser." Monroe nodded. "Yes, sir. And his body camera device. I want the data preserved, including the moment it stopped recording." Brad swallowed. "Marcus, listen." Hearing his first name in Brad's voice now felt strange, almost desperate. Marcus turned fully toward him. "No," he said, not loudly, but with finality. "You do not get to make this personal now because accountability has arrived." Brad opened his mouth, closed it, then looked toward Captain Monroe as if rank might still rescue him. It did not. Monroe's face was unreadable. Lena stepped closer to the trunk and quietly began photographing the disturbed contents with her phone, each image capturing what words could later be tempted to soften. The Bible, the sympathy cards, the state folder, the photograph. Marcus watched the small flash of the camera reflect in the glass frame, and for a second, he felt the weight of the day settle on him all at once. The memorial service, the hymn his mother loved, the empty place beside him in the church pew, the drive through streets that remembered him only as someone they underestimated. He did not feel triumphant. That surprised him. even though it should not have. Justice, real justice, did not feel like applause. It felt like standing still long enough for the truth to stop shaking. A light wind moved through the pines, carrying the distant sound of church bells from downtown. 6 soft chimes drifted over the fields and across the road. Marcus closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, the cruiser lights were still turning, but they no longer seemed to belong to Brad. They belonged to the record now, to the moment, to everyone who had ever stood beside a road being told to be quiet while someone else wrote the story. Marcus looked at his mother's photograph one last time, then at the badge on Brad's chest. "My mother cleaned hospital rooms in this town for 31 years, he said. "She used to say clean work still matters, even when people pretend not to see it." His voice softened, but the words did not. "Today, I understand her better than I ever have." Captain Monroe stepped away from the open trunk and spoke quietly into her radio, her voice stripped of the easy rhythm officers used during ordinary calls. This was not ordinary anymore. Every word she said seemed to turn the shoulder of that Georgia road into a record, into evidence, into a place that would be remembered differently by morning. Brad watched her, his eyes moving from the radio to Marcus, then to Lena's phone as she documented the trunk with steady, methodical care. The old confidence had not vanished completely, but it had nowhere to stand. It flickered in him, searching for a doorway, a joke, a familiar face, anything that might bend the moment back in his favor. "Captain," Brad said, lowering his voice, "you know me. This is being blown out of proportion." Monroe looked at him slowly. "I know your file." That answer landed harder than a shout. Brad blinked. "My file?" Marcus said nothing, but Lena opened her leather folder again and removed 3 printed pages, each one marked with dates, complaint numbers, and short summaries written in cold administrative language. A traffic stop outside a grocery store. A search near a gas station. A college student detained for 40 minutes on his way home from work. A nurse stopped after a late shift. A father questioned in front of his children outside a church parking lot. Different people, same pattern. Dark body camera footage. Missing audio. No citation issued. No formal explanation that survived review. Lena handed the pages to Captain Monroe, and the captain's face tightened with each line. Brad took a step forward, then stopped when Monroe raised one hand, not dramatically, just enough to remind him that rank still mattered when truth did not favor him. Marcus finally spoke. "Those complaints were forwarded to my office before I was sworn in. I had not planned to discuss them today." His eyes moved to his mother's photograph, then back to Brad. "I had planned to bury my mother, visit her house, and begin the formal review tomorrow." Brad stared at him as if the timeline itself had betrayed him. "You are saying this stop is part of some investigation?" "No," Marcus said. "You made it part of one." The words were calm, but they rearranged the air. Monroe looked toward Brad's chest camera. "Remove the device and place it on the hood of my vehicle," she said. Brad's mouth opened. "Captain, that is not necessary." "It is necessary." The firmness in her tone left no room for performance. Brad looked around the road as if an audience had appeared without his permission. It had. 2 cars had pulled onto the far shoulder now, both at a distance, both with phones visible through windshields. The woman from the passing sedan had circled back and parked near the town sign. A man in a work shirt stood beside his pickup, pretending to check a tire while watching everything. Fairmont was no longer looking away. Brad removed the body camera slowly and set it on the hood of Monroe's sport utility vehicle. The small black device looked harmless there, like a piece of broken plastic, yet everyone understood what it carried and what it might have been made not to carry. Lena took another photograph. Monroe instructed Brad to place his cruiser keys on the hood as well. His hand hesitated over them, and for a second Marcus saw the full weight of the moment reach him. Not regret yet. Regret was deeper. This was recognition. The first cold understanding that the badge on his chest could no longer cover the man beneath it. "Pending review," Monroe said. "You are relieved from field duty." Brad's eyes sharpened. "Over this." Marcus stepped forward before Monroe could answer. He did not come close enough to crowd him. He did not need to. "Not over this alone," Marcus said. "Over every time someone told the truth and the system decided your comfort mattered more than their dignity. Over every complaint that became paperwork instead of protection. Over every person who drove away from you wondering whether the law was actually theirs too." Brad looked down. His sunglasses still hung from his shirt, catching the last red pulse from the cruiser lights. For the first time all afternoon, he seemed unable to find Marcus the teenager inside Marcus the man. The old nickname, the smirk, the careless tone, none of it fit anymore. Marcus had outgrown the room Brad kept trying to force him back into. Monroe turned to Lena. "We will preserve the cruiser footage and transfer the stop data tonight." Lena nodded. "My office will send the formal preservation notice within the hour." "My office." Brad heard it. His face changed again, and this time the recognition went deeper. Marcus was not merely someone important passing through town. He was the legal authority Brad would have to answer to, the very office meant to examine whether power had been used as service or shield. A long wind moved across the field, bending the grass in silver-green waves. The church bells had stopped, and evening settled softly over the road. Brad looked at Marcus at last, not with respect exactly, but with the first uneasy shape of it. "I did not know," he said. Marcus held his gaze. "That was never the problem." Brad frowned, confused. Marcus looked toward the people watching from their cars, toward Lena, toward Captain Monroe, toward the box holding his mother's Bible and sympathy cards. "The problem is who you thought I was before you knew." Brad stood beside the hood of Captain Monroe's vehicle with his camera and cruiser keys lying in front of him, small objects suddenly carrying the weight of every choice he had tried to minimize. The flashing lights from his own cruiser rolled over his face, but they no longer made him look powerful. They made him look exposed. Around them, Fairmont had become still in that strange way small towns become still when a private truth turns public. The woman near the town sign kept her phone lowered now, not hiding it, just waiting. The man beside the pickup had stopped pretending to check his tire. Even the wind seemed careful. Captain Monroe spoke with dispatch, arranging for another officer to take custody of the cruiser, while Lena stood near Marcus's sedan, reviewing the photographs she had taken. Marcus remained by the open trunk, one hand resting lightly on the cardboard box that held his mother's Bible. He could have left Brad in that silence. Part of him wanted to, not because he needed revenge, but because silence had been where Marcus had been left so many times. Let him feel it, a tired voice inside him whispered. Let him stand there with no one rushing to protect his version of the story. But then Marcus looked at the badge on Brad's chest and thought of all the people who had never received a moment like this, never saw the person who humiliated them lowered into accountability, never heard anyone in authority say, "I believe what happened to you." Marcus understood then that justice was not complete if it only changed who got to feel small. It had to change what happened next. He stepped toward Brad. Monroe noticed and grew still, ready to intervene if needed, but Marcus raised one hand slightly, calm. Brad would not meet his eyes at first. He stared at the hood, at the body camera, at the keys, at anything that did not look back. "Brad," Marcus said. The first name sounded different now, stripped of childhood and performance. Brad swallowed. "I did not know who you were." Marcus nodded once. "You said that already." Brad looked up, defensive instinct flickering. "I mean, if I had known you were with the state, I would have handled it different." The words sat between them, honest in the worst way. Marcus almost smiled, not from humor, but from the sadness of hearing the truth reveal itself so plainly. "That is exactly what I am talking about," he said. "You should have handled it differently because I was a citizen, not because I had a title." Brad's face tightened. He looked past Marcus toward the old road, the town sign, the cars watching from a distance. "You think I am the same kid from school?" Marcus studied him. The years had put lines around Brad's eyes, gray at his temples, tension in his shoulders. Life had touched him too. That did not erase what he had done, but it reminded Marcus that people were rarely only the worst thing they had become. "No," Marcus said. "I think you became an adult who never had to answer for that kid. There is a difference." Brad's mouth moved, but nothing came out. For the first time, his silence did not feel like strategy. It felt like a door opening onto a room he had avoided for years. "I remember the gym hallway," Marcus said. His voice stayed low. "I remember the scholarship form you took from my locker and passed around at lunch. I remember Mr. Hanley telling me boys will be boys while my mother sat across from him, still wearing her hospital uniform. I remember every adult who wanted peace more than truth." Brad looked down. His face had gone pale beneath the heat. "Marcus," he said, and the name came out rough. "I was stupid. You were cruel," Marcus corrected. Not loudly, not bitterly, Simply. Brad closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, they were not softer exactly, but something in them had stopped running. I am sorry, he said. The apology was small compared to the years. It could not restore a childhood afternoon. It could not erase a pattern of stops or return dignity to every person who had driven away shaken and unheard. Marcus knew that. Brad knew it too. Captain Monroe stopped speaking into the radio. Lena looked up from her phone. The people by the road watched without understanding every word, but sensing the shape of the moment. Marcus let the apology stand without rushing to rescue Brad from its inadequacy. Then he said, "An apology is where accountability begins. It is not where it ends." Brad nodded slowly, once, then again, as if the motion cost him something. "What happens now?" he asked. Marcus looked at the body camera on the hood, then at the darkening road beyond it. "The process happens. The review happens. The people who filed complaints get called back and listened to properly. You get due process, the same thing every person you stopped deserved from you." Brad breathed out, unsteady. "And you?" Marcus glanced toward his mother's photograph in the trunk. The glass caught the first pale reflection of evening. "I go home," he said. "Then tomorrow, I go to work." For a moment, Brad seemed to want to say more, but Monroe stepped beside him and quietly instructed him to wait near her vehicle until transport arrived. Marcus turned away, not as a man avoiding pain, but as a man refusing to build a home inside it. Lena came to his side. "Are you all right?" she asked. Marcus watched the road stretch toward town, toward the church, toward the house, where his mother's porch light would no longer be waiting. "Not yet," he said. "But I will be." Marcus closed the trunk with both hands. Not hard, not angry, just final. The sound moved across the road and faded into the evening fields. Captain Monroe's vehicle sat behind him with its quiet engine running, and another patrol unit had arrived without lights, parking at a respectful distance as if even the town understood that the loudest part of the day was over. Brad stood near Monroe, no longer wearing the certainty he had stepped out of his cruiser with. His badge was still on his chest, but it no longer looked like a wall. It looked like a question he would have to answer. Marcus did not look back at him for long. Some victories did not need an audience. Some wounds did not close because the person who made them finally noticed the scar. Lena helped him place the cardboard box in the back seat, careful with the Bible, the cards, the framed photograph. When she handed him the keys, her fingers rested against his palm for half a second, not as comfort exactly, but as witness. "The governor can wait until tomorrow morning," she said. Marcus gave a small nod. "Tonight belongs to my mother." He opened the driver's door and slid behind the wheel. The seat was still warm. The memorial program lay on the passenger seat where it had been before the stop, its corner lifted slightly by the breeze through the open window. Marcus picked it up and smoothed it flat. Evelyn Ellison smiled up at him, the same steady smile that had followed him through every courtroom, every late-night study session, every room where someone mistook his calm for permission to underestimate him. He set the program gently beside him, then started the car. The engine came alive with a low hum. In the mirror, he saw Brad once more, smaller now, standing beneath the fading pulse of red and blue. Not the monster of his childhood, not the final word on his worth, just a man on the side of the road, facing the beginning of consequences. Marcus shifted into drive. The sedan rolled forward slowly, tires whispering over gravel before finding the smooth blacktop. As he passed the Fairmont welcome sign, the last light of day burned along its white wooden edges. A good place to call home. For years, those words had felt like a sentence that did not include him. Tonight, they felt unfinished, waiting for better hands. He drove into town without music. Storefronts slipped by with their awnings folded for the evening. The barber shop was closed, but the striped pole still turned lazily in the window. The old pharmacy had become a coffee shop. The courthouse clock glowed above Main Street, its hands nearing 7. Farther down, Fairmont High rose behind a line of oak trees, brick walls darkening under the purple sky. Marcus slowed as he passed it. The gym doors were locked. The parking lot was empty. Nothing moved except leaves skittering across the painted lines. He remembered being 16 there, gripping a scholarship form so tightly the paper wrinkled, telling himself that one day he would leave and never again feel small beneath those lights. He had left. He had become more than the town expected, more than Brad believed. more than even his younger self could safely imagine. But the peace he felt now did not come from proving them wrong. It came from realizing he no longer needed them to understand him in order to stand tall. A mile later, he turned onto Magnolia Street. His mother's house sat at the end of the block, porch light glowing though no one had been there to turn it on. Lena must have called the neighbor. Or maybe Mrs. Carter from next door had remembered. Marcus parked at the curb and sat still for a moment, both hands on the wheel. The house looked smaller than memory, white trim, blue shutters, a cracked walkway lined with marigolds Evelyn planted every spring. He carried the box inside. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. On the kitchen table, someone had left a casserole covered in foil and a note that said, "We loved her too." Marcus placed his mother's photograph beside it. Then he stood in the quiet kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum, the floor settle, the whole house breathing around him like a prayer. Outside, a soft wind moved through the magnolia tree. Marcus removed his suit jacket, folded it over a chair, and turned off the overhead light. Only the porch lamp remained, spilling gold across the front steps. He looked once more at his mother's face in the frame, then at the sealed state folder resting beside it. Grief and duty, past and future, love and law, all of it on the same table. Marcus exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, he would begin the review. Tomorrow, people who had been ignored would receive phone calls. Tomorrow, the badge would have to answer to the truth. But tonight, he stood in the house that built him, under the quiet light his mother left behind. And for the first time since crossing back into Fairmont, Marcus Ellison felt the road behind him grow silent.